Hi, I'm Christina Rhodes.
And I'm Tempest Rose.
We are two millennial women 4 decades in.
We're revisiting the culture that made us, with a little more hindsight.
And a lot less bullshit.
We've made our own rules.
Built our own spotlights.
And we're here to speak our minds without playing dumb.
And without playing nice.
Hi, everybody.
Hi.
Today, we thought we would discuss periods.
Fun times.
Yes, I don't know what led us to this, but here we are. I haven't had a period in probably about 10 years. And not a proper one for even longer than that, having been on the pill for a very long time.
Mm-hmm. Do you ever worry about not having it?
I worry that it's not natural to suppress your period for a very long period of time. I balance that with how productive I've been over the past few years of my life. And although it started as a joke, when I say to people, why do you think I'm so productive? There is a grain of truth in that. I just don't. I had very intense periods. We'll get into this growing up. And obviously it's a cycle. It's a hormonal cycle. You are definitely affected depending on which time of the month you're in. And I just sort of exist on an even keel.
No, it's nice. I mean, I remember my GP told me when I was a teenager that I should start taking the pill because I also got such heavy periods. And I asked her about, is it natural? And according to her, back in the day, it wasn't natural for women to bleed as much as we do now, or at least we did back then. And so she said there's zero, even as like a young person, she didn't see any problem with at least doing it, kind of having a period once every 3 months.
Oh, what does she mean by not natural?
It's actually, now that those words come out of my mouth, it's a very good question that I wish in hindsight I would have looked more into for this episode. But I just remember, I remember reading about even back then that women were getting periods younger and that they would often last for longer. And they weren't sure whether that was like environmental or...
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, that's so interesting.
Yeah, now I feel like, well, somebody else can go look it up and let us know.
Can someone please tell us about this?
Yeah.
Because it sounds very fascinating. That does make sense of when I looked into different products used by women. Again, we'll come around to this in due course. But it would make more sense if women were bleeding less often and less heavily. I feel like the options available would not have worked for me when I was having my natural period at all. But is that a millennial thing? Because that was very common for GPs to say to teenage girls about going on the pill to help with problems or like extra painful periods, heavy flow. I'm not sure they would still make that recommendation.
Oh, really? Do they have a different solution, or they're just suck it up? That doesn't feel like a very of the moment thing to say just suck it up.
It doesn't, but I also don't feel it's very of the moment thing for your GP to you should go on the pill. There are no downsides. It's great. Okay, next audience delegation. Please can somebody who is a teenager or in your 20s who has had very intense periods tell us what the current vogue by the medical establishment is to tell you to do to cope with them, because we were all told to go on the pill.
Yeah, correct. Well, should we start kick things off back there? Should we go at the beginning with what our own personal period journeys were?
What fun. Tell me.
Get ready. So I first got my period when I was away at summer camp, which if you're American, is like a very American thing to do. And I was at an all-girls summer camp. And I learned the lesson on this day that girls can be very, very cruel. Because you would think that I was 12 at the time, being surrounded by other women, most of whom were older, so I was one of the youngest campers. Most of these were girls who had gotten their periods already, and all of the camp counselors were women who were obviously adults. You would have thought that, in a way, that would have been a really nice place to experience it, surrounded by other young women and women. It's correct. It was horrible. So I remember I was wearing white. I had been horseback riding, and I was wearing white riding pants And there was like a giant blood stain on the back and nobody told me.
Oh,
and then I could like
savage.
hear all the other girls like talking about it and like laughing about me. And one camp counselor sort of like sat me down and brought me some stuff and whatever else. But yeah, people were like super, super bitchy about it and nobody wanted to talk about it. So that was like,
Wow.
felt like there was a lot of like shame involved in it too and sort of cattiness.
That's so mean.
I know, it was really mean. That's me. How about you?
I don't have as dramatic a story as starting my period. I had two older sisters, so I knew about periods. They had very painful, heavy periods, as did I. And I think that from my recollection, our education at school around periods was pretty good. So it was definitely like, oh my God, has it started yet? Has it started yet? Has it started yet? Has it started yet? Rather than maybe being like surprised. It was definitely in this context of like, you'll all be starting your period soon, so get ready for it. So my education came from my sisters, from my school, not interestingly from my mother, no disrespect to her on the subject, but I have memories more of my father being supportive of dealing with my periods than perhaps from my mother, who is of a very different generation. So I'm glad for having the older sisters there. Otherwise, maybe I would have been a bit more blindsided. I remember finding blood and being surprised that it was brown and not red. And then also that then nothing really happened. And then like you start sort of spotting again. And I think maybe in my head, I was like, it's going to be bright red and then it's going to start and it's just going to be like a
Niagara Falls.
Yeah, basically. And it's just going to be consistent. And that's obviously not what happens. I remember being horrified. So this is going to get gross. Well, it's going to get visceral.
Yeah, but like, is it gross? Is it gross?
Gloopiness is gross. And I was not prepared for that. Again, we grew up with this idea of like blood being like as if you would cut yourself blood. Never any discussion about like older blood, how that looks, the smells that come with your period. And every advert on the TV showed blue-dyed water being poured into products. Do I remember correctly? It was literally only nanoseconds ago that you first got an advert for period products that actually showed red.
Yeah. I don't even know if I've ever seen one. I don't really watch TV anymore. So yeah, all I know is that it's not blue, but it is in the adverts.
It's not blue water. Oh, and did you have Tampax tampon adverts which showed women like running, horseback riding, jumping out of airplanes? Oh my God. You would have thought like a period was like a subscription to a kind of parkour-esque activist energy drink rather than
you would
feeling like
that.
your insides are trying to slowly kill you.
Were yours painful from like moment one?
I couldn't say moment one, but very early on. And I would be sick. I would be bedridden. They were useless at finding me proper painkillers. This will be a familiar experience for every woman who's ever had really painful periods. So we had Feminax and that was useless. I had better luck when I was slightly older with muscle relaxants, naproxen, I think, mefenamic acid. But you have to take, certainly at first, I found maybe my body stored it. So after a while, I didn't need to do it so far in advance. But you're supposed to, as was the advice at the time, I don't know what now it is. So like 3 days before your period or 4 days before your period, you need to start taking this medicine. But your periods, especially when you're young, are not that regular. So I nearly blacked out once in Birmingham Station. I remember, and my whole eyes went fuzzy. I used to think of the pain in my periods like the scene in Reservoir Dogs where Mr. Orange is in the back of the taxi and he's been shot and he's like writhing around and like screaming in agony. And I was like, that is what my period is like. My sister, once her period pains were so bad, her work called an ambulance for her.
Oh, God.
And she was mortified, obviously. But yeah, I think it's really hard for people to understand who have not had this themselves or maybe had someone close to them have periods in this level to appreciate how extreme that pain can be. Because I went on the pill when I was in my late, probably early 20s. I think it does get better with age. Did you have painful periods?
I didn't have overly painful periods. But there's a term, I can't remember it, but there's a medical term for people that have particularly aggressive pain. So I don't know if maybe that was what you and your sisters suffered from. But no, I don't remember. Mine was more, my doctor recommended that I go on the pill just because they were really heavy. So it wasn't so much pain. It was just that when they came, and mine were also super irregular for a variety of reasons, then they were just like just ridiculously annoying more than anything else and quite inconveniencing. And, I did not feel like I was living in a Tampax commercial where I could go jump out of planes. It felt very much like I had to be quite stationary and couldn't do a lot.
Not a single woman ever felt like she was in a Tampax commercial. And you were always terrified that you were going to leak through your clothing.
Oh, yeah. I did many times.
Yeah.
Until it just can't be embarrassed anymore.
Well, yeah. Like a significant part of my teenage years was washing blood out of sheets or underwear. I did ballet. Oh, that's mortifying when you start your period and you're obviously in leotards and tights and everything is off-white or baby pink. I mean, when you get to wear the black leotards, the further up the grades you go, and it's like, oh, thank God. And then you have to start wearing tampons. And I didn't wear tampons until I was, 16. So probably 3 or 4 years after I got my period. I thought they were terrifying.
Yeah, totally. Well, my mom also didn't want me to use the plastic applicators. I'm sure she had very valid reasons, as I think we'll get to later with all sorts of creepy things that are inside of tampons. But to the concept of inserting a tampon without an applicator when you were basically a child and you haven't had sex before is not pleasant.
Terrifying. I was so scared of tampons. My best friends on holiday taught me how to use a tampon because we were going swimming. So obviously, yes, that's this whole thing.
Swimming.
Can't go swimming when you're on your period unless you use tampons. So you have to have the humiliation of going to your PE teacher and saying that you have your period. Therefore, could you be excused from swimming? And they were not always very sympathetic to that. So I got taught how to use tampons. And that was fine. But then I couldn't get it out.
Oh,
it was just so stressful because it's all about the angle. In or out, it's all about the angle. And I just didn't know anything about this.
Oh God, that's one really embarrassing story. I don't even know if I've ever told you this. So I joined the choir when I was in high school because they were the group that got the most amount of days off of school, not because I'm actually good at singing at all. But anyways, we did a school trip to Cuba, of all places, which was amazing and another crazy story. But we were quite insulated, right? So they brought parents on to the trip who were doctors and nurses. And I guess would have been probably 3 years into having 3 or 4 years into having my period at this point. And I got it stuck. It got stuck. And I was like, has it come out? Has it not come out? And again, before you're kind of sexually active or is comfortable with your own body, maybe aren't as comfortable. I was not as comfortable going on a fishing trip down there. I just panicked. And so I had to have 2 of the parents come in and put a towel over me and raise my legs up and in the middle of my hotel room fish out a tampon from me.
But had the string got lost inside?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. That especially at that age, that must have been mortifying.
Yeah, and then I had to sit down at breakfast with them the next day. I was oh. Yeah, that was bad news.
That's traumatic.
Yeah, and then it happened a second time, but not with a tampon. And this was a trip where we were on together. I decided to try and use a sponge. True hippie fashion, which is also terrifying. And then the sponge got stuck. And so I don't know if you remember, but I had to go to the doctor.
I do.
Yeah. Very handsome doctor. And he managed to fish that sponge out.
Oh my God. It's so crazy how little we know about our bodies, how alien women's bodies are to us. I don't think people understand that. And you forget the older you get. But you really, women's bodies are this totally secretive, private, strange, bizarre contraption that you're stuck in and you don't really understand. And periods are I'm going to hazard a guess that I'm going to make a statement. Periods are the first time that I think you really experience that because your body obviously is changing because of puberty. And you're just very aware how little you probably know. I mean, I said my education was good, and it was within its context, but there were just so many things I didn't know, really.
There's so many things I still don't know. I mean, we'll get into perimenopause later, but yeah, I mean, I feel like it's embarrassing, but I'm 40 and I still feel like, because I've had irregular periods my entire life, I'm like, why am I so emotional today? What's happening? Why do I want to eat all the chocolate that I can see? And then I find out.
It's not remotely talked about how much your period affects your mood, your mental state, fluctuations within body size, water retention. We're talking about something that happens to half the population, over half of the population.
Yeah, it's nuts. Well, you did a bit of research on, if you're okay to jump here, you did a bit of research on like what periods looked like historically.
Yeah, I was trying to find out before tampons and sanitary towels, and you've started using period pants, which sound incredible.
Game changer, total game changer. So I didn't discover a period pant until the ripe old age of like 38. And I think I probably just like saw one on an ad on the internet. And I was like, oh, this is interesting. But I love them. I now feel like I'm living in a Tampax commercial because I do. I wear them and they're like they're made up from that material that's like, quote, seamless, and they're all flesh toned and they're great. I mean, literally, I cannot live without them now.
They sound incredible.
Yeah.
Why did we not have that growing up?
I don't know, but it's interesting because actually that would have been sort of like a version of that would have been considered what certainly like what some people in developing countries would have used would be something more like a rag, basically, that would get washed and dried and reused. And you consider that like, I mean, obviously a period pant that costs 40 pounds is totally different. But in concept, it's a pad that you wash and reuse.
Yeah. It's fabric that you wear, but that you, yeah, exactly, like you
bleed into.
I'm just repeating you now, sorry. Just saying exactly the same thing you've already said. The dog needs to shush or go on the floor.
Maybe she wants to talk about her period experience.
It puts the lotion in the bucket and it's quiet. So back in the day, I watched some videos, educational videos on how women previously would have dealt with their menstrual flow. And one content creator just very clearly pointed out that actually we don't know a lot because none of this is written down. This is all women's private business. And so it was talked about privately and not put in medical textbooks or educational textbooks. So we really sort of only know what we know and can guess rather than we officially have a record of how women dealt with their periods. And I suppose what changed that is when companies realized that they could market to women for their periods, because then obviously you have a record of advertising and sales. And so I guess that probably colors our experience a little bit of our knowledge of period and sanitary products. There is a class difference as well between what women would have used. So working class women in Europe probably would have free bled, they imagine, which does go more hand in hand with what you were talking about, like maybe periods wouldn't have been so regular. Oh, here's something. Yeah. Because contraception wasn't readily available, women spent more time being pregnant and recovering from pregnancy and breastfeeding. And all of those things affect how many periods you have. So nowadays, women, and we live longer, have more periods than we've ever had before, which makes a lot of sense, actually. And so where women who worked, when I say free bled for, well, I don't know, we're talking like 500 years ago, 400 years ago, they would use rags to clean themselves, but wouldn't have, because they didn't wear pants. So it's not like you can put something in your pants to hold against your body to soak things up. So they would have undergarments that sort of absorbed a lot of the blood, and then they would wipe themselves down and wash the rags that they used to do that.
Oh, interesting. I mean, I'd be curious to know when sort of not undergarments, but like pants, underwear became prevalent anyways? Like, when did that become a thing where you could sort of support something like a pad or?
Yeah, probably later on. I'm going to guess the early 1900s, late 1800s, because then women started doing things like sports and
Yeah.
being more active. I mean, we're talking about wealthier women, but these would have been the women who would have driven products, I think.
Yeah.
So then again, you have underlayers of garments, but they think women homemade girdles, which had changeable and washable fabric in the middle of them.
Yeah.
Which I guess is an earlier version of period pads, to soak up their periods. And these were, because all clothing was made at home, again, these were privately made. But then later on in the turn of the century, you had these actually built by companies. So you could buy girdles for periods to hold your period products in. And I was quite surprised. They marketed a kind of backwards apron that you would then tie around your waist. That was, I mean, we didn't have plastics then, but had some kind of like cleanable element to them. So when you sat down and stuff, you had this apron that sat under your butt and further down, again, to shield the period blood from staining your clothing.
Yeah.
So you had shifts and they would be washed and would collect up the blood. Then you had an apron and you had homemade girdles, free bled, they think more working class or rural women. And I think it's the First World War, a nurse was observing the gauzes on wounds that stuck to the blood in the wounds and thought, oh, gauze fabric, we should use that for periods.
Yeah,
and so,
that's interesting.
Yeah, that became a vogue.
With the free bleeding, it's an interesting one because I feel like, I mean, maybe it's just my own like teenage embarrassment, but I certainly felt like my dad was very supportive when I was growing up, but I don't remember having any conversations with him about my period. I'm sure it would have grossed my brother out. Like, I didn't get the sense when I was growing up that men were like really comfortable with women bleeding. I even remember like meeting somebody who just had a baby and she was telling me her husband refused to go to the store while she was in hospital to like go buy the pads because he was so embarrassed.
Oh my God.
It's a different tangent. She should not have had a baby with him. But I just wonder, like, so back then we kind of have this like, it's this private world that we don't know anything about, presumably because it was sort of considered, I don't know, maybe not shameful, but then if you're free bleeding, I don't know, like the men around you just be like, yep, there's just like a trail of blood going everywhere. That's totally cool.
Well, I think people to balance that against how limited privacy was.
Oh, sure.
So privacy is an upper class.
Yeah.
And for when you have the emergent middle class, you could buy privacy. But working class people, you'd have whole families living in rooms together, sharing beds. Like parents would have sex in front of their children, which sounds very criminal when I say it, but not like for show. Yeah. But just that you sort of all lived on top of each other.
Yeah.
So all of your biological functions are all actually much more exposed than we would ever consider proper or civilized, in a way that, I mean, really, what's that phrase? The past is a different country.
Yeah.
Women would have given birth in the home, but not in a room squirreled away upstairs in the wing of the house. Yeah. But like probably the room where the hearth is on the other side because you need to be near the water and the kids are running around. And I don't know, the menfolk are probably sent out somewhere. But you mean like a family home is one room a lot of the time. And so maybe they just wouldn't have, like they knew women bled, but it just wasn't such a thing that now is so commentable on because we are shielded, I guess, through our better level of hygiene, you could say. But this idea that privacy is very normal in the way that it just wasn't.
Yeah. But you say that, but then obviously in other cultures, there are things around sort of menstrual tents and women going away together to experience it without menfolk around, right?
Yeah. So there's this wealthy women that had the luxury of returning to this idea of staying in bed during their period. So the first 2 to 3 days, they would just sort of rest. And I'm conflicted about how to feel about that because I've definitely been around more kind of new age, back to the earth. And we should all get much more in tune of our natural cycles movements, which say, and this does make sense to me, women have totally different ways of being in the world and energy levels due to our hormones depending on where we are in our cycle. If you haven't messed with your cycle like I have by taking artificial hormones. And so you should know which is the more productive time of the month for you, which is the time of the month where you actually need to be more low energy or conserve your energy. And maybe you do want to spend a day when you first get your period of just resting, because that is what your body wants to do and needs to do. But then we look at this idea of like, when women are on their periods, they have to go to the period tent and are basically ousted from society, as we would think of it in the modern world, because as women, we are in the world and women have to go to work, and work isn't written on your period cycle. You turn up 5 days a week. Like the 5 days a week working schedule is written for men.
Yeah.
Not women. If the whole world was run by women and women worked, we would probably have a completely different way of structuring working cycles.
Yeah, totally true.
So I don't know really how to feel about that. And I think I am obviously a fan of women working and being involved in the world, which is a world structured by men with men's biology in mind. But it does go against the natural rhythmic patterns of our bodies, it seems. But I mean, our whole society is different to how we would have lived indigenously. So,
hey, true. That's an interesting one, because also if you were, we talked on a different podcast about the kind of population decline and the concerns around that. And if you're like trying to encourage women to have more children and be more in touch, well, in a way, be more in touch with their bodies, and maybe you should be encouraging them to take time off. But then it also, it does reek of kind of keeping you trapped up and down. And you're not as... Not that you're not as productive, and you're not as productive, but you're not as like successful, I guess, if you link success and productivity and sort of career together. It's an interesting one. I mean, I didn't look into this, but I do know from personal experience the kind of amazingness of the human body in that cycles can link together.
Yeah.
I mean, that is nuts, don't you think?
Yeah, women syncing up their cycles. I've read conflicting reasons as to why. It's got to be something to do with syncing up fertility or trying to cut out fertility competition.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, because again, women's experiences in history and in the world, and as half of this is people within human society, are woefully underexplored. I think they don't really fully understand why it happens. But it does.
It's kind of crazy, though, that there's like some little period goddess inside of you who's like telepathically linking to the other little period goddesses inside the other women around you.
Yeah.
To all link together.
Yes.
It's crazy.
Sex on your period. This isn't our list, but it did pop into my mind.
God. No. I mean, I've definitely had partners who are like, yeah, like doesn't bother me at all. It doesn't bother me at all. But it bothers me, man.
Yeah.
I don't like it. It's not that my period is gross, but like sex is messy anyways. But like period sex is real messy. I mean, I've done it before, but it's not like
you prefer.
It's not my preferred mode, no. And you?
Yeah, I agree with you. I don't have a problem with it. I don't necessarily want to see my blood all over my partner, but some people like it because, don't they, there's more lubrication.
Sure.
It's supposed to be a cure for period pains.
Is it? Oh,
Orgasm.
Actually, yeah, well, and masturbation then too.
Yes.
It's supposed to be like a natural if you're having those pains. That's not something they teach in school.
That is not something they teach in school.
Not back in the day.
My GP did not tell me that.
It's probably censored for most things on the internet. You heard it here, ladies.
You were looking into internet censorship, period messaging and education.
Yeah, I was. And it's really interesting. And there's a whole lot more, I think, to kind of deep dive into. But some of the interesting little tidbits that I found were really, I guess one of them was around shadow banning. Have you heard of this term before?
Shadow banning, yeah.
Yeah. So for those of you who don't know, if I understand this correctly, because I think you're much more social media savvy than I am, it's that the the algorithm will kind of not silence you necessarily, but not allow you the level of exposure that you would normally get from a post because it considers something controversial. So it's not telling you it's taking the post down. It's just not giving you sort of natural repercussions that you would get from it, natural exposure. And that there has been a lot of research into how AI basically considers any image of the female body, whether it's like even your area around your neck or a pregnant woman's belly, as pornographic, and even a woman in like a swimsuit or underwear that's not lacy or anything like that, and not doing anything that appears pornographic or sexual in nature, can still, just by virtue of being basically a woman's body, can be read as pornographic, versus a man in kind of comparable, if you're sort of doing comparable posts with, say, the same text, an image with multiple men in a slightly more suggestive situation who are topless will not be considered pornographic.
Yeah. Men are biological, women are sexual.
Yeah, exactly. And also things like I was looking a little bit into femtech, which is all of the sort of technology geared towards women's health and reproductive, and not just women's health in general, and how one of them was sharing that they went to go post their products on Amazon and they had to change the way that they named their product to reference a birthing canal, which feels like quite an offensive term to me. And it's like an insensitive term, because vagina will automatically get you banned on Amazon, versus things like semen are totally allowed and not considered pornographic. And you sort of think like,
even though semen is only sexual.
Right, exactly. Just ridiculous.
I am not surprised at all.
No.
Sadly not.
But yeah, I mean, I think, I was shocked by how many people, certainly under the age of 30, get their information now more from TikTok than from Googling, as somebody who's not on the TikTok. But it sort of presents this interesting question, because I suppose there is an argument to be made that you don't want people who don't have medical training giving medical advice. But I don't feel that actually has any correlation to why the AI is like taking down posts that reference how to do a breast exam, or how to do, vaginal, like just anything to do with your perimenopause or your periods or anything.
Yeah.
Or even lubrication when it comes to sex. Like having a dry vagina can be one of the signs of perimenopause, but like you're not allowed to talk about that basically on social media because it's considered pornographic and you'll get canceled.
This is so annoying. You would have thought the robots could pattern words together to understand better when something is being talked about in a medical context or a biological, educational context, and what is porn. Particularly, if you guys have listened to our pornography episode, how extreme a lot of pornographic content is. So it would be potentially linked with words and phrases, or even analyzing movement that is just so light years away from what would be used in an educational or medical context. I can definitely see how you can fall into this mindset of there is a concerted effort to stop women talking about their bodies and educating ourselves, because young people do get so much of their information online. I mean, I say young people. I know there are people our age who will go to TikTok or maybe to YouTube, which I like to call the Gen X TikTok, to find out stuff, because it's just sort of quicker and a bit more visually stimulating and interesting than reading articles, taking in words. We just don't read as much. I'm gonna hazard a guess that we don't read as much as we used to, and we like to take in information in a more visual medium. So that is, of course, things like TikTok or Reels. And to suppress sharing information, you raise a good point about you don't want people who aren't medically trained sharing information, but given that the overwhelming majority of women, 99.99999999999% are going to have to deal with periods in some context, that's not really medical information, is it? That's just bulk standard life.
Yeah, completely. And also, I mean, and again, we'll get probably more into this when we talk about menopause and perimenopause, But we were talking about this a little bit before we started. GPs in the UK are not required to go through any training on menopause or perimenopause. It will literally affect more than half the population. But you don't need to know anything about it. What? And it's like that's like a medical thing. This is like biologically going to happen to you.
Yeah. It blows my mind. I'm a 43-year-old woman and I know nothing about menopause. And I know there's a big vogue at the moment for trying to get better information out there about menopause. And I really applaud that. But I have to say, I've watched the reels and I've ordered the pamphlets and I still don't understand a fucking thing about menopause.
Yeah.
I still don't understand. And I've watched, there's some menopause commentators on TikTok and some of them are really great. But I sort of watch them and I feel like, okay, I've got past the bit where you're clearly trying to sell me a whole load of hormones that I need to buy. I don't know enough to know whether what you're selling me is complete snake oil, grifty nonsense. And I feel like I'm watching a shopping channel. And that's not educational about menopause. I still know nothing about menopause. How is this possible?
No, I know completely. I mean, I started to look into perimenopause a little bit. And I mean, it's crazy. Like, so apparently 80% of women will experience symptoms and they can go on so I think in my head I was like, oh, okay, like perimenopause and menopause, it'll be like a few months of like inconvenience and it'll be annoying.
Years, no?
Wow, 4 to 8 years is the average, and then it can go on for over a decade, but it has a giant effect on you. Like it can affect anxiety, depression, sleep patterns, mood swings, like so much brain fog. You're not just getting stupid, your brain is literally just not able to cope with, or it's coping with a lot more than the male brain is by the virtue of it having to deal with this hormone imbalance that is so much bigger than what men have to deal with.
Yeah. I mean, the reality is, thinking about it, menopause is like going through puberty, or after puberty is the biggest change you will have. I mean, I guess you have unless you have children, which is obviously it's all linked. That's all the same sort of process in the body. And men just do not have anything like that at all, which explains why we still don't know anything about it. The thing I find really funny, like so many women are on the pill. So many women are taking contraception that interrupts their period cycles. And the stumbling block that I get to of every online guide, whether it's from the NHS or it's from a private company that wants to find out where I am in my menopause, perimenopause journey, the first thing they asked me was, when was my last period? And there is no button to press that I have yet found that says I don't have periods because of contraception, which is so insane to me. It's right. And so you just can't really do anything else. So then I have to lie and say, oh, it was last week or whatever, just to access some more information. But obviously then that's not accurate, because being long-term on some kind of contraception will surely change how my body processes menopause. But the I guess it's like, oh, if you don't have a period, you're not going to go through menopause. Well, that's not what's happening, though.
Yeah.
I will go through menopause.
But also, I mean, you say that surely it will, but like, will it? Has anybody done a study? Is that like information anybody can access?
I'm going to bet you £1 million right now that no one has written a single post-it about this little study.
I mean, it's crazy. One of the other things I was looking into was something I came up on menopause penalty. And as a Stanford professor who published a paper this year, Tempest, it's 2025, and it is one of the first studies about menopause and economics and how they're interlinked ever. We just think, again, like it, a huge portion of women who are still in the sort of 45 to 55, which is considered the average menopause or perimenopausal and menopausal age, will still be at work. And yet nobody's studying what the actual impact is. There was one other study which from the Mayo Clinic, and that estimates that there's $1.8 billion in lost work time every year in America alone from women who have to take time off from menopause, who start taking lower hours because they're in so much pain, who just quit altogether because they can't, because like the changes that are going on in their body make it impossible for them to show up to do work in the same way. It's crazy. And in the study from Stanford, she found that for any women who went to go see a GP about perimenopausal symptoms, within 4 years, their earnings would be down by 10%.
Wow.
Which is crazy too, when you think that at that age, that is the age that you should be if you're a working woman, then those are kind of your prime years, right? This is when you have the seniority. This is when you'd be going up for, C-suite positions. This is when you should be kind of in your prime. And in fact, women are taking less time and quitting or taking less hours because, again, there's, because they're going through this giant change, which affects them, and nobody's, doing any studies or any support or anything else around it.
Yeah.
Not none, but there's not,
it will be very limited.
Yeah.
Yeah. We know that already because there's hardly any research done on. So Invisible Women is a book that I cannot recommend enough to everybody. I'm going to guess it's mostly women who read it, which is really the counterproductive unfortunacy of things like this, because it's not women that need to read it, although it is very useful for women to understand, because I do think there's this big drive as we move towards equality, as we argue that women have just as much of a place in the world as men do. The realities of biology is a very uncomfortable fact for people to take on board. And the whole point of the book is that women get left out of discussions about how cities are designed, about how medical research is done, how disaster relief is done, things that are product design, product testing, safety testing. And one of the reasons that they get left out of a lot of medical research is because this is in the early stages. So later medical testing does tend to be more balanced between men and women, but earlier on they tend to test on men first because men don't have hormonal cycles in the same way that women do. And so they feel that they get more consistency in the data, because obviously a woman's data could fluctuate during different times of the month as she's impacted by hormones and other sort of, biological cycles that are happening. But when you consider that means that every single drug, when it first gets tested to a significant degree, is only done on men who have completely different biology to women.
God.
And so, I completely believe that women have not been studied when it comes to how our biological changes might intersect with the workplace, so they talk a lot about, the burdens of childcare, but also looking after. So your point is so interesting to me about not understanding the impact on productivity, on the economy, when women have been going through menopause. And it's not just the personal impact on them and their families, it's also the impact on our society and our economics. Because in general, we do not factor in women's unpaid labor when you're looking at a country's GDP or kind of any measure of its society or financial growth or economic peaks and troughs. But this is all stuff that happens to half of the population, but also society needs to function. And that's not directly, unpaid labor in the home is not necessarily directly to do with what we're talking about periods and menopause, but I do think it's that half of society is living in this totally shadowed experience that does impact the world in which we live in so many ways, but the institutional kind of perception of it is like, la, 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 let's not look at it, let's not talk about it, let's not count it up, let's not study it, let's not analyze it, la, 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 la.
Yeah, it's overlooked. We're overlooked.
We're overlooked.
The moral of the story.
We're ignored.
We are. I mean, it was just like flabbergasting looking into some of this stuff. Because again, it's not like some rogue thing that affects some small portion of the population. It affects a huge portion of the population. And yet, it's still a mystery.
It's a mystery.
Yeah.
To ourselves.
I know.
I know I've said it before, but it wasn't until we were planning for this episode that I had just forgotten how much of a mystery my own body was to me. I remember being a teenager and sitting around with my friends when you start discussing things that maybe you're not really supposed to discuss. And we were like, do you get really hurty poops when you have a period? And everybody's like, yes. And it's like, oh my God, I thought it was just me. All this stuff that we just don't talk about.
Yeah.
Period poverty is something that we didn't talk about at all, but has now started to be a discussion, which is great. And you've done some research into that.
Yeah, just a little bit. I mean, I remember, I'm embarrassed to say that the first time I sort of really thought about period poverty was when I was working on an education project in a developing nation, and really had been in a privileged enough position to never have considered it before, because I have always had access to whatever it is that I needed. But yeah, it was really interesting. I was also interested sort of doing the difference between the sort of top level difference between the UK and the US. So, I was happy to hear that in the US, 28 states, which is not all of them, but in 28 states, the schools, either K through 12 or so 6th grade through 12th grade, which I don't know how that equates to here, but it's before you go off to university, right? Graduating high school, had to require some level of free period products. Now, whether that is how accessible it is, whether you have to ask permission for it, that I'm not sure of. But technically, there should be some level of support there. But I was disappointed to see that apparently 2 in 5, as of last year, 2 in 5 women who are in a menstruating age struggled to afford period products. And if you are on food stamps, which is like the dole, I guess, as the word for it here, if you're being supported by the government because you can't afford food, period products are not considered essential items. So you can't buy them with that money, which is ridiculous. And very disappointing. And then a lot of states still have sales tax on them because, again, they're not considered an essential item, which is just nuts to me. But then I was very happy on the UK side to hear that in Scotland it's totally free. And not only is it free, but you have to be able to get them with dignity and respect and have a variety of options available. Now, that's what it says, but who knows how true that is. But when I went under a little bit further, they have an app, which I looked through, and it's very convenient. And you can just type your postcode and you can find all the little dots where you can get your free period products. And I thought that was very nice, very nifty.
It's wild, actually, that you should have to pay for period products at all. And that initiative in Scotland seems so great. I feel definitely that period products are cheaper now than they were. Last time I bought some, I'm sure you could get packets of pads or tampons for 99p. I still think they should be free,
Yeah.
but I'm pretty sure that they were relatively much more expensive when I was younger. And yeah, that's crazy. This is a basic. You cannot, if you have a period, you cannot not have products for it. This is an extra tax on women.
Yeah, completely. That we will have for our entire life.
Yeah.
It's an additional cost, it's an additional hindrance. And also, again, if you want to be supporting women having children, then presumably you should support them having a period. Because
you can't have one without the other.
Exactly.
That's so true. I hadn't even thought about that. No, it's absolutely wild. You can get contraception for free here.
So it's cheaper.
Yes.
It's cheaper to just be on contraceptive and not be able to have children than it would be to make little babies for the UK or the US or wherever you live.
That's so funny. Yeah, the period poverty stuff is a good initiative, and definitely, I think globally, still a massive issue. I'm hoping people are talking about it more. Yeah, I really feel the burden of this lack of understanding that for a lot of women, once a month, this huge thing happens to you that you're not allowed to talk about, that you're not allowed to show any outward signs of going through. Again, not having a period for a long time for myself, I've forgotten things like having to stand in the loo and hand wash my pants and then dry them under the hand dryer to be able to get on with moving about in society, not free bleeding or drawing attention to myself in a way that I would find uncomfortable and possibly other people would also find uncomfortable. These are just big things that dominate the way that you move through the world. And we're very lucky here because we have access to products and spaces where we can get things or go to. We have an imperfect but existing educational system that will at least offer information. And I think it's great that boys do learn about periods as well. I do think that there should be some separation. Not that I don't want boys to learn about periods, but being a teenager is really tough. And there are times when you don't want to talk about something really intimate and biological around teenage boys who are by and large
little dickheads.
Yeah, there you go. But definitely education for all young people is important.
Yeah, but I do agree with you. I think both parties should be educated on it, but I think probably it's better for everybody if maybe some of that education is a little bit separated.
Totally.
But just going back to the period poverty, I mean, in, more developing countries, but even for, people who really are struggling in fully developed countries like the US and the UK, it's crazy that you will biologically have this thing, which arguably society wants you to have, and yet it's going to cost you money, which means you can't spend your money on something else. It's going to potentially cost you education because you might have to miss work or school because you can't afford the products that are going to make you feel comfortable, or if you don't have access to them.
Or you're in pain.
Or you're in pain, totally. Or when you get to working age, that you might miss work for any of those reasons too. And then, which means you might be not as up for promotions. You might be considered flaky or, not reliable. And then when you get to, if you are a working person, you get to this like prime of your career, that you would end up undergoing something that's so traumatic to your body that it's difficult for you to balance both. And I don't mean that as like a sign of weakness, but like it is a real biological thing that you're going through. And it's much harder than any biological thing a man is going through at the age of 45 to 55.
Oh my God, absolutely. And I guess now you phrased it like that. If you add up the time when you first enter the working world, if you take time out to have children, then you're going to go through menopause. Not only does this have an impact on your immediate wage and your promotion opportunities, but on your pension.
True. Yeah. I didn't even think about that. Yeah. I mean, things need to change. That's my takeaway.
Yes. I agree. And everyone needs to read Invisible Women. Please. Everybody. Everybody.
I know what every man on my Christmas list is going to get.
That's so lucky.
I can see my fiance's face now.
I'll buy him a copy too. That will be your wedding gift.
It's funny, that wasn't on the registry.
Hey, thanks so much for listening. We love making this podcast and we really want it to grow. So if you enjoyed listening to us,
please like, subscribe, give us a 5-star rating. Also, feel free to comment, DM us, open up a conversation. The whole point of this podcast is to be in support of having open lines of communication and debate, and we would love to hear from you.
Listen to the sirens.
Woo!